In November, Variety reported exclusively that just a month after closing out season 14 of America's Got Talent, judges Gabrielle Union and Juliana Hough would no longer be on the show, and that a culture of insensitivity with regards to race and gender was pervasive. Joining me now, senior film writer Matt Donnelly, who broke the story. Okay, so Matt, what happened?
Well, a couple of weeks ago, right before the Thanksgiving holiday, we reported that sort of unceremoniously, only after a month that season 14 had been off the air, that Gabrielle and Julianne would not be coming back, which is sort of uncommon given that they replaced longtime female judges of the show, including Mel B and Heidi Klum. In a follow-up report to our initial, we spoke to as many as 10 people close to the production who described a very toxic culture at the set, and that was on the part of Fremantle, which produces the series, Simon Cowell's company Psycho, and distributor NBC, and the response has been kind of overwhelming.
So what were the accusations exactly?
Right, so a lot of them specifically deal with Gabrielle Union, and she is someone who I think it's not a mystery, is sort of outspoken for marginalized communities. You know,
Yeah.
She is a woman of color, she's an entrepreneur, she's a survivor of sexual assault, and throughout the season we were told by multiple sources that instances would come up surrounding, like you said, racial insensitivity and sort of a very specific pressure on women on the show. And I think one of the most striking ones was that Gabrielle, as an African-American female, often expresses herself and her culture through her hair, which is nothing new in the US and certainly abroad. And she was given a specific note many times throughout season 14 of America's Got Talent that her hair was too black, and that's a direct quote from multiple sources. It's a devastating thing to hear, especially in the time we live in, you know, in a post-Me Too, a post-Oscar So White world. It's kind of jarring. One of the more egregious examples too is over 2,000 people were witness to guest judge Jay Leno making a joke about Asian people eating dog meat, which many found insensitive, and that we were told Gabrielle specifically asked an NBC executive assigned to the show to sort of raise with human resources, and not just specifically report the joke, but make sure that someone from NBC would come in, educate the staff, and maybe tell people why it was offensive, which is sort of, I think, where the industry has been moving in recent years, to not just, you know, slap people on the wrist, but to educate workplaces about why stuff might be bad. So all of these things combined over an entire season, and then all of a sudden Gabrielle and Julianne have not been renewed to come back. After only,
interesting.
Yeah, exactly.
But this culture of insensitivity, it sounds like there also was something of a precedent of it from former cast members. Nick Cannon, Sharon Osbourne have kind of shared their stories as well, right?
Absolutely, yeah. In 2017, Nick Cannon, who had hosted the show, which is now being done by Terry Crews, for 7 seasons. He was sort of synonymous with America's Got Talent, and sort of unceremoniously just resigned in a scathing Facebook post that sort of blasted NBC. The story goes, Nick did a standalone stand-up comedy special for Showtime, and in that special, like many comedians do, talked about his day job, which is America's Got Talent. He described that he couldn't basically use certain racial slurs or certain like body humor anymore because AGT is a family show. And lo and behold, he alleges that someone from NBC attempted to retaliate against him. And basically he said he'd rather have his principles than have the money.
Wow.
So he walked away. And also he did make another interesting note that he called NBC's handling of him a suppression of free speech and also a suppression of cultural expression, which does directly echo the notes given to Gabrielle about her hair.
Yeah, and then Sharon Osbourne also weighing in, right?
Sharon Osbourne, who actually launched the show here in the US before Simon Cowell was even a judge, described what she said was a boys' club. Basically that men got all the perks in the world and just had a better standing in the show, and that women were not paid as much and didn't have as much sort of equity in stake in the show.
So how has NBC responded since your reporting?
Great question. So immediately NBC gave us Variety a blanket statement saying that they take issues of insensitivity on set seriously, and that they expressed a desire to speak to Gabrielle even after her termination about what her issues might be. That meeting happened as recently as last week. It lasted 5 hours in a fact-finding mission. NBC has hired a third-party counsel to now conduct a full investigation into the past season and hopefully beyond into America's Got Talent. So that will be an ongoing process that will interview all staffers from all 3 production entities, that will interview the hosts, and we can only hope that maybe NBC would be transparent with their findings.
And Simon Cowell has lawyered up as well?
Simon Cowell has hired a very powerful entertainment lawyer named Larry Stein. Gabrielle has hired an attorney named Brian Friedman who represented Megyn Kelly in her suit against Fox News. So I think it's a pretty serious endeavor. For NBC, America's Got Talent, the format of the competition show is owned outright by Simon Cowell. It's his show. So NBC licenses that show from him. But The production takes place on the NBC Universal lot. I think a lot of those people enjoy the same sort of practices and guidelines for just general employment from NBC standards.
Yeah.
So they'll hopefully do a thorough investigation over the next few weeks and see if anything was out of line with their best practices in terms of reporting grievances, in terms of workplace safety.
With regards to workplace safety, what specifically?
Another report from Vulture said that Simon Cowell was prone to smoking indoors and has been for the length of his career. Gabrielle Union happens to be allergic to cigarette smoke, which inspired a 2-month-long bronchial infection in her, which sort of could be argued is damaging the instrument of an actor and a performer.
Sure.
But also it's against California law to smoke indoors. And that report said that the issue was raised with the fire marshal, and now you're sort of looking down the barrel at a labor code violation. So I think it's a pretty serious matter.
Well, I know you will be following this very closely, and I mean, once you get the lawyers involved, it gets very, very real, as we know. Yeah. Matt, thank you so much. And for more exclusive reporting on the business of entertainment, visit Variety.com.